Hi, friends. I have Stella. This is Stella. Stella, can you say hi? Turn your head and say hi. Stella, say hi. Stella's bashful. She don't want to say hi. And let me see if I can get Charlie. There's Charlie. Charlie, you gonna say hi? Charlie, say hi. Say hi, Charlie. No, don't talk to me. Talk to the... There you go. There you go. You're on camera. And they're not really letting Mom have camera time. Oh, I got a honey. They're really getting quite used to me being here all the time. I think they're past the wonder stage of why I'm not leaving, and they're just spoiled. They're spoiled. Anyway, I'm reading chapter 9 and maybe chapter 10 since I have these buddies on my lap. We'll see how we do. Chapter 9, A Fish in a Tree, is bag full of nothing. Remember, she's gone to a different grade. And he says, Mr. Daniel says that he's talked to Miss Silver and he doesn't want her to go to the office. And let's just see what Allie does. Today, we're supposed to bring something that represents us to tell us about it. Let me start over. Today, we're supposed to bring in something that represents us and tell the class about it. I thought of a few things I could bring, like a can full of dirt or a bag full of nothing. Mr. Daniels asked for volunteers to go first. Shock of the century when Shay raises her hand. She gets up there in the picture of her horse, Diamond. She goes on about how she loves him and goes riding several times a week, but how it's a lot of work to take care of him. And she shows us her riding helmet and her fancy riding jacket too. I guess there really isn't anything she doesn't have. Jessica brings a picture of Shay and talks about what good friends they are, which I think is funny since we're supposed to talk about ourselves. Oliver bounces to the front of the room. His feet are never on the floor at the same time. He takes out a light bulb. I am the giver of light. Really? Mr. Daniels asked. Well, my dad is. He sells lamps. And when I grow up, I'm going to be a salesman, too. I'm going to sell hangers. Hangers? Mr. Daniels asked. Yeah, because I think that it should be something that everyone has. Because you want to sell stuff that most people need. Because if you sold stuff that nobody wanted, then you wouldn't sell anything, right? And everybody needs hangers. Mr. Daniels smiles and puts his hand on Oliver's shoulder. Oliver, you are one clever boy. You know that? I haven't been in this school that long, but I'm going to guess that Oliver hasn't heard that said much. He falls into his chair, which tips back, but he grabs his desk, rights himself, and cheers for his own victory. I want to show y'all this. Charlie, do you like this story? You do? Do you want me to keep reading? Okay. Stella, you don't like this story? I think you might be a little jealous of Mom reading. Albert goes up next. As always, he wears the shirt with Flint on it and his bruises. He reaches into a brown lunch bag and pulls out a jar of clear liquid. He clears his throat. This is a mixture of 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen molecules. Will it explode? Yells Oliver. Albert does not answer. Instead, he unscrews the metal lid and drinks whatever it is. I'm silently freaked out, but Oliver goes nuts. He drank it! Did you see it? He drank molecules! Gross! It's merely water, Albert reports. While Mr. Daniel speaks to Albert, Shay whispers to Jessica, Water? Really? That's all he's got? Shay has gotten even better at being mean. Ever since Mr. Daniels kept her in for recess for making fun of Oliver, she saves her comments for when Mr. Daniels is busy or talking to someone else. This water was taken from a giant underground lake that goes on for miles and miles. Albert announces it's the same water that the dinosaurs walked through hundreds of millions of years ago and the caveman drank. It's the same water that polar bears swam in just last year and medieval knights guzzled after battle. Oliver and most of the other boys stand, trying to get a better look. "That's cool, Albert," Max says. "Where'd you get it?" Jessica and Shay smile and lean forward to look at Max. Shay calls out, "Yeah, Albert, where'd you get it?" "I got it from my kitchen faucet." The same water has been here and been reused since the earth began. It is important to me because as a scientist and historian, I know that we are but a blip in the earth's timeline, a grain of sand on an entire beach of time. Kids are starting to groan. "Here goes the professor again," Max says. "Hey, Charlie, do you want to say hi?" You can say hi. I got kisses. You want to say hi? Charlie. Say hi, boys and girls. Oh, are you hogging the camera? Okay, you gotta hop out of the way so I can finish. Kids are starting to groan. "Here goes the professor again," Max says. "Yeah, such a show-off," Jessica says, turning to Max. "Now knock that off," Mr. Daniels says. "I think Albert's idea is fascinating. How Earth has recycled its water over and over. Extraordinary, Albert." Next, he calls on Keisha. She carries a small box and holds it like whatever is inside will break easily. When she takes out a cupcake, the boys argue about who will get to eat it. "This is a cupcake that I made. It isn't from a box mix. It's homemade." "And why is it important to you?" Mr. Daniels asks. "I like to bake. I told my mom I want to start a business when I get older, and she said there's no time like the present. So this is the first one I'll show to anyone outside my family." "My goodness," Shay whispers. "She acts like she's the first to make a cupcake, and it's not even decorated or anything." "Shay, please keep your comments constructive," Mr. Daniels says. "Yes, it is plain on the outside," Keisha says, half smiling at Shay. "But it's the inside that matters." Keisha takes a knife out of her box and cuts the cupcake in half and shows us the inside. Yes, you can see it says "Yum" on the inside. "How did you do that?" Suki asked, and I'm surprised to hear her talk. She hardly ever says anything. "I've been experimenting with making letters out of different kinds of dough. I stand the letters up in the cupcake batter and carefully cover them with more batter." "Do you lick the spoon when you're done?" Oliver asked. "I like to lick the spoon, but my mom says too much sugar isn't good for me, so she doesn't bake much because of it." "Oliver," Mr. Daniels says, pulling on his own ear. Oliver stops right away. Then Mr. Daniels looks at the cupcake. "Wow, Keisha, that's pretty impressive. I'm going to call my baking business Hidden Messages, the better way to send a note." How cute is that? I'm going to call my baking business Hidden Messages, the better way. Get it? Not better, but batter way to send a note. If you don't know what batter is, it's the mixture of cake before you make the cupcake. So you've mixed your flour and your sugar and your eggs and your oil and your all that good stuff together, and that's your batter. "That's fantastic, Keisha," Mr. Daniel says. "The possibilities are infinite." Albert raises his hand and Mr. Daniel points to him. "The possibilities are not in fact infinite, as she would eventually run out of appropriate letter combinations and the number of letters to be used in each cake would be limited as well. Also, you imply that the possibilities are all positive when it is probable that the possibilities would be equal in positive and negative outcomes." Actually, you're correct, Albert, Mr. Daniels says, but I'm an optimist. What can I say? So you agree with the possibilities aren't endless? Well, I agree from a mathematical standpoint, Albert, but not from a human one. I believe that the things we put numbers on aren't necessarily the things that count the most. You can't measure the stuff that makes us human, like Keisha's creativity or how hard she'll work, Mr. Daniels shrugs. Just my opinion. Well, it seems that part that can be measured is most important, Albert says, because that's what can be proven. Well, my fine young fellow, I think we'll have to agree to disagree, Mr. Daniels says, walking by Albert and patting his shoulder. When Mr. Daniels calls on Suki, she pulls out tiny paper bags and begins to pass them out to everyone. Sorry about the dogs. I bring 2 foods to share. One is, I'm going to try this, guys. Hone senbai, my grandfather's favorite. Other is wasabi peas. They are maybe spicy. Food in America tastes. She turns to Mr. Daniels. What is correct word? All of a sudden, Max jumps up and runs to the sink, followed by Keisha and Jessica. Too hot, Max yells. The 3 push each other a bit, trying to scoop water into their mouths. Ah, yes, Suki continues. Bland is the correct word. Food here is bland. She seems to think that the 3 kids at the sink are both funny and odd. I think how hard it would be to move to a different country and have to learn another language. I can't even handle one. You can't either, can you? Mr. Daniel laughs, holding the little bumpy bright green pea between his fingers. They don't look that hot. Most people in class are too chicken to eat it now, pushing it away. Suki looks a little hurt. Albert puts one in his mouth. He eats it, but looks like he's in pain. His eyes even water. He says with a gasp, I like it, Suki. Thank you. That Albert is nice. Oliver pops his in his mouth, but has no reaction. Oliver, Mr. Daniel asks, you don't think it's hot? Nah, I'm the only one in my family that can finish a fireball without taking it out of my mouth. My mother says I have no taste buds at all, and my dad says... Mr. Daniel pulls on his earlobe again and says, thanks, Oliver. Oliver's mouth is open, ready to keep going, but he says, thanks, Mr. Daniels. Do they have some signal or something? Suki continues. These foods mean much to me because I shared them with my grandfather. Many things about Japan I miss, but grandfather I most miss. Also, I miss wood carving with him. He make me wooden blocks, and I carve gift for him and send. So that's why she has those blocks. I eat these foods because they remind me of Japan and my grandfather. I feel sad for her. What are the crackers made of? Asks Albert. Suki turns to him. They are made of shrimp and fish bones. It isn't just Oliver who goes wild over that one. Most everyone says, yuck! And Suki looks up at Mr. Daniels, who turns to the class. Now, quiet down. Shrimp and fish bones, Shay asks. We prefer lobster in our family. Albert raises his hand. I would just like to point out that lobster is a very expensive meal now, but in the olden days it was only served to peasants and slaves who revolted and demanded that they only be served lobster twice a week. And, he swallows, I think fish bones would have some excellent nutritional properties. Suki smiles for a second before she scurries back to her seat. Mr. Daniels gives Albert a solid nod. Next, it's my turn. When I ended up bringing in means something to me, but now I'm not sure the class would be nice about it, and I decided to play it safe and say I forgot. I can tell Mr. Daniels is disappointed. Well, then, do you have a pet you can tell us about? He asked. No, my mom is allergic. This reminds me of my dad crawling around the living floor on all fours pretending to be a puppy I begged for. Oliver starts to bark like a dog. Mr. Daniels says, too much of that, Oliver, and we'll have to give you dog biscuits. Better be careful. Mr. Daniel squints at me. Are you sure there's nothing you can show us? Because I have a feeling there's something. I slid my hand down into my pocket and clutched my 1943 steel penny, the object I brought in for sharing today. He watches my hand and I realize I've given myself away. So I stand and take out the penny. My dad is in the Army and he's deployed right now. On the day my dad left, he gave Travis and me pennies. I look up at Mr. Daniels. That's my big brother. He nods. In 1943, pennies looked weird because they were silver and color like quarters. They were made of steel instead of copper because the government needed copper to make ammunition during World War II. Then in 1944, pennies went back to the usual red copper color. Anyway, I think it's cool. I do too, Mr. Daniels says, and I think it's even more cool that you told us about it. As I walk back to my seat, I think of how my dad left, and he said that when he looked at the steel pennies, he said that when we look at the steel pennies, we need to remember that we are unique too, and also that things will go back to normal for us, and that he'll be home before we know it. I really miss him. Mr. Daniels gives Oliver a thumbs up, and I think how cool it is that they have the ear-pulling signal. That way he doesn't always have to tell Oliver that he's doing something wrong in front of everyone. I know what that feels like, and I'm happy that Mr. Daniels cares so much. Most teachers seems to like their students to be all the same, perfect and quiet. Mr. Daniels actually seems to like that we're different. Oh, I like that y'all are different. And I miss you so much. That was a really long chapter. It was 16 minutes. Of course, I was talking to the pups too. So I'll pick up with chapter 10 tomorrow. I love y'all. I miss you. Feel my hugs. Feel my high fives. Even those that don't want hugs, I'm going to hug you. But only from 6 feet away. So talk to you soon. Email me. It's smeredith@jcboe.net. I'd love to talk to you. I will email back. Kayla Brack, thank you for your emails. I'll email you back. Talk to you soon. Bye.